The metal doors slid open with a soft hiss. Princess Zarathis stepped into the bright white room, her silver skin gleaming under the harsh lights. She was tall and lean, with sharp features that looked like they were carved from stone. Her black eyes showed no emotion as she looked around the combat chamber. "Begin final trial," came a voice from the speakers above. Zarathis did not move. She did not need to prepare. She had been built for this moment. Every cell in her body was designed for war. Her muscles could become harder than steel. Her bones could bend without breaking. Her mind could process battle data faster than any computer. The first attack drone appeared from the wall. It fired red laser beams at her. Zarathis moved like liquid shadow. The beams passed through empty air where she had been standing. Her right arm changed shape, becoming long and sharp like a sword. She cut the drone in half with one smooth motion. More drones came. 10 of them. Then 20. Then 50. They filled the air with deadly light and metal bullets. Zarathis danced between them. Her body shifted and changed with each movement. Sometimes she was solid like armor. Sometimes she flowed like water. Sometimes she struck like lightning. In 3 minutes, all the drones lay broken on the floor. "Trial complete," said the voice. Combat efficiency perfect. The doors opened again. Emperor Vextar walked in. He was Zarathis's father, but not in the way humans understood family. He had made her in his labs. He had shaped her DNA with his own hands. She was his greatest creation. "You are ready," he said. His voice was deep and cold like winter winds. "The humans have resisted us for too long. Their small worlds mock our empire. You will end this." Zarathis nodded. She felt no joy or anger about this task. She felt nothing at all. Emotions were weaknesses that had been removed from her design. "Tell me about the humans," she said. Emperor Vextar touched a wall panel. Images appeared in the air between them. Ships, planets, battles. The humans looked small and soft compared to Cytherians. They had no natural armor, no shape-changing abilities, no enhanced reflexes. "They are weak," the Emperor said, "but they fight in strange ways. They do things that make no sense. They save their wounded instead of leaving them to die. They protect their young instead of using them as shields. They waste resources on pointless activities." "What kind of pointless activities?" "They make sounds they call music. They create images they call art. They plant flowers that serve no purpose. These weaknesses make them unpredictable." But weakness is still weakness. Zarathis studied the images. She saw human soldiers helping wounded enemies. She saw human civilians sharing food with refugees from other species. She saw human children playing games that taught cooperation instead of competition. "I do not understand their behavior," she said. "You do not need to understand," Emperor Vextar replied. "You only need to destroy." 2 days later, Zarathis stood on the bridge of the flagship Stellar Dominion. Through the great windows, she could see 1,000 Cytherian ships stretched across space like a metal storm cloud. They moved toward a small blue-green planet called New Haven. The planet held 50,000 humans. Intelligence reports said they had basic weapons and simple shields. They should surrender quickly when they saw the size of the Cytherian fleet. "Begin assault," Zarathis ordered. The first wave of ships descended toward New Haven. Zarathis expected to see white flags of surrender appear on her screens. Instead, she saw something else. The humans were fighting back. Their ships were tiny compared to Cytherian vessels. Their weapons were weak, but they moved in patterns that confused her tactical programs. Instead of attacking the strongest Cytherian ships, they focused on protecting their evacuation transports. Instead of trying to win battles, they tried to buy time for civilians to escape. "Report," Zarathis said to her weapons officer. "The humans are not fighting to defeat us," he replied, his voice puzzled. "They are fighting to save their non-combatants. They keep putting themselves between our weapons and their evacuation ships." Zarathis watched the displays. A human fighter craft flew directly into Cytherian fire to shield a transport full of children. The fighter was destroyed, but the transport escaped. This happened again and again. "They are sacrificing their warriors to save people who cannot fight," she said. "Yes, Princess. We do not understand this strategy." Neither did Zarathis. In Cytherian warfare, the strong survived and the weak died. This made the species stronger. But humans seemed to believe the opposite. They thought protecting the weak made them stronger. The battle continued for 6 hours. The Cytherians won, of course. They had more ships and better weapons, but the cost was higher than expected. The humans had saved most of their civilians, and they had made the Catherians work hard for their victory. As the last human ships limped away from New Haven, Zarathis received a transmission on the main communication channel. She expected demands for mercy or threats of revenge. Instead, she heard something that made her pause. To the Catherian forces came a human voice, calm and tired. "This is Captain Lisa Park of the New Haven Defense Fleet. We are defeated. Our world is yours, but we want you to know something. The people you killed today were not just soldiers. They were teachers and doctors and farmers and artists. They had families who loved them. They had dreams they will never see come true. We ask only this: remember us kindly. Remember that we tried to protect those who could not protect themselves. That is what humans do. That is who we are." The transmission ended. Silence filled the bridge of the stellar dominion. Zarathis felt something strange in her chest, a sensation she had never experienced before. For just a moment, she wondered what it would be like to have dreams, to have family that loved you, to sacrifice yourself for others who were weak. Then her conditioning reasserted itself. These were useless thoughts. She was a weapon. Weapons did not dream. But as she ordered her fleet toward the next human world, the words echoed in her mind. Remember us kindly. The ruins of New Haven still smoked 3 days after the battle. Zarathis flew her personal scout ship low over the destroyed city, scanning for any remaining human resistance. The buildings were broken shells. The streets were empty except for scattered debris. Her sensors detected no life signs. The planet was dead just as planned, but something bothered her. During the final assault, she had watched human ships flee toward the outer rim. The evacuation had been almost perfect. For a defeated species, the humans had saved an unusual number of their people. "Princess," came a voice through her communicator. "Fleet Command requests your return to the flagship." "Acknowledged," Zarathis replied. Beginning ascent. She pulled back on the controls to climb toward orbit. That was when the debris field struck her ship. The chunks of metal came from nowhere. Pieces of destroyed buildings and broken spacecraft, still floating in the atmosphere from the battle. Her ship's shields deflected the first impacts, but there were too many pieces moving too fast. Warning lights flashed red across her control panel. The engine made grinding sounds. The ship shuddered and began to fall. Zarathis fought the controls, trying to reach a clear landing zone. But the ship was dying. She managed to avoid the worst wreckage, but the landing was hard and rough. Metal screamed against stone. The ship slid across broken ground and finally stopped against a collapsed wall. Smoke filled the cockpit. Zarathis felt warm liquid on her face. Blood. Her enhanced healing was already working to fix the damage, but she was hurt worse than she had ever been before. She tried to get out of the ship, but her legs would not work properly. Pain shot through her body with each movement. For the first time in her life, Princess Zarathis was vulnerable. That was when she heard voices. "Over here. I found something." "Is it one of theirs?" "Yeah, it looks like a scout ship. Could be survivors inside." Zarathis reached for her weapon, but her arm would not obey her commands. The voices came closer. She heard the sound of metal tools working on her ship's hull. "Got it. Doors opening." Light flooded into the cockpit. Shapes moved in the brightness. Zarathis expected to see human soldiers with weapons pointed at her. Instead, she saw a woman with kind eyes and medical equipment in her hands. "Don't move," the woman said softly. "You're badly hurt. We're going to help you." Zarathis tried to speak, but only managed a weak sound. The woman leaned closer, checking her injuries with gentle hands. "I'm Dr. Maya Chen," she said. "This is going to hurt, but we need to get you out of there." More humans appeared. They lifted Zarathis carefully from the wreckage and placed her on a stretcher. She expected them to bind her with chains or point weapons at her. Instead, they covered her with a blanket and started an IV drip in her arm. "Why?" Zarathis whispered. Dr. Chen looked down at her with those same kind eyes. "Because you're hurt, and we're doctors." They carried her to a hidden medical facility built into an underground cave. The place was small and simple but clean. Human survivors moved quietly through the corridors, tending to their own wounded and maintaining their equipment. They put Zarathis in a private room with soft lighting and a comfortable bed. Dr. Chen worked on her injuries while other humans stood guard outside, but they were not the kind of guards Zarathis expected. They did not threaten her or ask questions. They just watched and waited. The next morning, a new guard came into her room. He was a tall man with tired eyes and gentle hands. He carried a chair and set it down beside her bed. "I'm Jake Martinez," he said. "I'll be staying with you while you recover." Zarathus studied him. He was clearly a soldier. She could see the way he moved and held himself. But he was not acting like any soldier she had ever known. "You should interrogate me," she said. Jake shrugged. "Maybe later. Right now you need rest. Dr. Chen says you'll be okay, but it will take time. I am your enemy." "Yeah, I know." Jake settled into his chair. "Doesn't mean you're not hurt?" This made no sense to Zarathus. In Catherian culture, enemies were tortured for information and then killed. These humans were treating her like a patient instead of a prisoner. "I don't understand you," she said. Jake smiled for the first time. It was not a cruel smile or a mocking smile. It was sad and warm at the same time. "That's okay. We don't understand you either." Over the next few days, Jake spent long hours in the chair beside her bed. At first, Zarathus expected him to ask about Catherian military plans or weapon systems. Instead, he talked about simple things. He told her about the weather on New Haven before the attack, how the mornings were cool and the afternoons were warm, how the wind smelled like flowers from the valley farms. He told her about the crops they used to grow, corn and wheat and vegetables she had never heard of, how the farmers would share their harvest with anyone who was hungry. He told her about his daughter Emma, who was 8 years old and loved to collect unusual rocks, how she would spend hours looking for stones with interesting colors or shapes, how she would make up stories about where each rock came from. "She found this one rock that was perfectly round and bright blue," Jake said, pulling a small stone from his pocket. "She said it came from the bottom of the ocean on another planet, where blue fish used it as a ball for their games." Zarathus looked at the rock. It was just a common mineral formation, nothing special, but the way Jake held it made it seem precious. "Where is Emma now?" she asked. Jake's smile faded. He put the rock back in his pocket and was quiet for a long time. "She died in the first bombing run," he finally said. "She was drawing pictures of flowers when the attack started. I couldn't get to her in time." Zarathus felt that strange sensation in her chest again, the same feeling she had experienced when she heard the human transmission after the battle. "I am sorry," she said, and was surprised to discover she meant it. Jake nodded. "Me too." They sat in silence for a while. Then Jake spoke again, his voice very soft. "You know what her last words were? She asked me to water the flowers in our garden so they wouldn't be sad. She was 8 years old and she thought flowers could feel sad." Zarathus did not know what to say to that. In her world, flowers were just plants. They had no feelings. They served no purpose except to reproduce and die. But as she lay in that quiet room, listening to Jake breathe beside her, she began to wonder what it would be like to care about flowers, to worry about their feelings, to water them even when they served no logical purpose. These thoughts disturbed her. They were not part of her programming, but she could not make them stop. On the 5th day, Jake helped Zarathus walk to the window of her room. Her legs were still weak, but her body was healing faster than the humans expected. Through the glass, she could see a small courtyard hidden deep in the cave system. "What is that?" she asked, pointing to a patch of green growing under artificial lights. "Our garden," Jake said. "Dr. Chen insisted we keep it going even after the attack." Zarathus studied the small space. There were rows of vegetables that made sense, food for the survivors. But there were also other plants that served no clear purpose. Bright flowers in red and yellow and purple, vines that grew in pretty patterns but produced nothing useful. "Those flowers," she said, "they are not food. They cannot be used for medicine." "Why do you grow them?" Jake was quiet for a moment. "Because they're beautiful. Because they make people smile when they see them. Because Dr. Chen says hope grows better when there are flowers around. Hope is not a plant. It cannot grow, can't it?" Jake turned to look at her. "Before the attack, Emma used to sit in our garden every morning. She would draw pictures of the flowers and make up songs about them. Watching her do that gave me hope that the world was still a good place even when bad things happened." Zarathus processed this information. In Catherian society, hope was considered a weakness. It made soldiers hesitate. It made leaders second-guess their decisions. It served no practical function. "Your daughter wasted time on useless activities," she said. Instead of getting angry, Jake smiled. "Yeah, she did. She was great at it." The next day, Jake brought Zarathus to the garden itself. She moved slowly, still recovering from her injuries, But she was curious about this place that served no military purpose. The air smelled different here, sweet and fresh like nothing she had experienced on Cytherian ships. The flowers were even more colorful up close. Some had patterns that reminded her of mathematical sequences. Others seemed completely random. "This is Emma's favorite spot," Jake said, kneeling beside a patch of small white flowers. She planted these herself. Said they looked like tiny stars that fell from the sky. Zarathis knelt beside him. The flowers were simple and delicate. A single touch could destroy them. They had no defenses, no way to protect themselves. Yet somehow they kept growing. "They are very weak," she observed. "Yeah, but they keep trying anyway. Even after everything that happened, they keep blooming." Jake touched one of the petals gently. Emma would have liked that. As they sat in the garden, other survivors came and went. Dr. Chen stopped to check on a patient who was sitting in the sunshine. An elderly man named Ben worked quietly with the tomato plants. A young woman called Amy read a book to some children near the flower beds. Zarathis watched them all. These humans did things that made no tactical sense. They wasted energy on beauty. They spent time comforting each other instead of planning their next moves. They shared their limited resources with people who could not contribute to their survival. "Why do you do these things?" she asked Jake. "What things?" "All of it. The flowers, the stories, the sharing. None of it helps you survive. None of it makes you stronger." Jake considered this question for a long time. Around them, the garden hummed with quiet activity. Bees moved between the flowers. Water dripped from the irrigation system. Children laughed somewhere in the distance. "Maybe it does make us stronger," he finally said. "Just not in the way you think." "Explain." Jake pointed to Dr. Chen, who was now helping Ben with the vegetables. "Maya could have escaped on one of the last ships out. She's one of the best doctors in the colony. Any ship would have taken her. But she stayed behind to help the wounded even though she knew the Cytherians were coming." He pointed to Ben. "Ben lost his wife and 2 sons in the attack. He could give up, just wait here to die. Instead, he grows food for the rest of us. Says his family would want people to be fed." He pointed to Amy and the children. Amy's not even their mother. "Those kids lost their families. She takes care of them anyway. Reads to them, makes sure they remember how to laugh." Zarathis processed this information. "These behaviors do not increase survival probability." "No," Jake agreed. "But they increase something else. Something we need just as much as food or water or air." "What?" "Reasons to survive." That night, Zarathis lay in her bed thinking about Jake's words. Her body was almost fully healed now. Soon her people would find her. They would take her back to the fleet and she would continue the war against humanity. But something was wrong. The thoughts that usually filled her mind, battle plans, weapon configurations, target assessments, seemed distant and unimportant. Instead, she kept thinking about white flowers that looked like fallen stars. About little girls who made up songs. About old men who grew tomatoes for people who were not their family. She got up and walked to the window. The garden was dark now, but she could still smell the flowers. Somewhere in the shadows, she could hear the sound of water dripping onto leaves. Her reflection in the glass looked different somehow. Her silver skin seemed softer. Her sharp features appeared less threatening. When she moved her hand, her fingers did not automatically shift into weapon configurations. This alarmed her. Her body was designed to maintain peak combat readiness at all times. Any deviation from her baseline parameters should trigger automatic corrections. But nothing was happening. If anything, the changes seemed to be accelerating. She tried to force her body back to its proper shape. Her skin should be harder. Her muscles should be denser. Her reflexes should be faster. But when she reached for these configurations, they felt wrong. Like putting on clothes that no longer fit. Instead, her body seemed to be adapting to something else. Something it had never been designed for. When she thought about the garden, her skin became more sensitive to touch. When she remembered Jake's gentle voice, her hearing became more attuned to subtle emotional nuances. When she pictured Emma's drawings, her eyes began processing color and beauty instead of just tactical data. For the first time since her creation, Princess Zarathis was afraid. Not of death or defeat or pain. Those were simple things her training had prepared her for. She was afraid of becoming something her creators never intended. Something that cared about flowers and songs and reasons to survive. She was afraid of becoming human. But as she stood at the window, watching the dark garden and listening to the quiet sounds of people sleeping safely nearby, She realized something else. She was not sure she wanted to stop the changes. In the distance, she could hear Jake's voice from earlier that day, soft and sad and full of love for a daughter who would never come home. She thought flowers could feel sad. Maybe they can. Maybe that's what makes us human. We care about things that might feel sad, even when it doesn't make sense. Zarathis closed her eyes and let herself imagine what it would feel like to care about something that might be sad. To water flowers not because they were useful, but because they deserved kindness. The sensation that filled her chest was unlike anything in her programming. It was warm and painful and beautiful all at once. She thought it might be what humans called love. The alarm that woke everyone came at dawn on the 10th day. Zarathis sat up in her bed as red lights flashed in the corridor outside her room. She could hear people running and shouting orders. Jake burst through her door, his face pale with worry. "What's happening?" she asked. "We intercepted Catherian communications," he said. "Your fleet is moving toward the core human worlds. They're planning something big." Dr. Chen appeared behind Jake, carrying a tablet computer. Her hands shook as she showed the screen to Zarathis. "Can you read this?" Dr. Chen asked. The text was in Catherian military code. Zarathis scanned it quickly, her enhanced mind processing the data. What she read made her chest feel cold. "Operation Final Strike," she said quietly. "They are going to attack civilian population centers first. Refugee camps, schools, hospitals. They want to break human morale before the military engagement begins." Jake grabbed the edge of the bed. "How many people?" 3 million in the first wave. 12 million total." Zarathis looked up at their horrified faces. "It will begin in 6 hours." Dr. Chen sank into Jake's chair. "We have to warn them. Send out an emergency broadcast." "It won't matter," Zarathis said. "The human fleets are positioned to defend military targets. They cannot reach the civilian areas in time. Then those people are going to die." Jake's voice was flat and hopeless. Zarathis stared at the tablet screen. She could see the tactical display in her mind. Catherian ships moving into position around human worlds. Children sleeping in refugee camps, unaware that death was coming from the sky. Families who had already lost everything, about to lose their lives as well. She thought about Emma, who drew pictures of flowers and worried about their feelings. She thought about all the other children like Emma, who would never grow up to plant gardens or tell stories or care about things that might be sad. "I can stop it," she said. Jake and Dr. Chen both stared at her. "What do you mean?" Dr. Chen asked. "The flagship carries the primary command codes for the orbital bombardment system. I have access to those codes. I can disable the weapons before they fire." "Why would you do that?" Jake's voice was suspicious now. "Those are your people up there." Zarathis met his eyes. "Because 3 million children should not die to prove a point about strength." But before anyone could respond, Lieutenant Sam Torres came running into the room. He was the military leader of the survivors, a hard man who had lost most of his unit in the battle for New Haven. "The Catherians found us," he said. "Search teams are moving toward our position. We have maybe 20 minutes before they breach the outer defenses." Dr. Chen stood up quickly. "We need to evacuate the patients." "Where?" Torres asked. "They have air support and ground troops. We're trapped." Jake looked at Zarathis. "Can you contact your people?" "Call them off?" "They will not listen to me," she said. "I have been missing for 10 days. They assume I am dead or compromised. Any communication from me will be considered enemy deception. So what do we do?" Dr. Chen asked. Zarathis stood up from the bed. Her body felt different now, stronger in some ways but changed in others. The tactical programs that usually ran constantly in her mind were quiet. In their place, she felt something else. A warm pressure in her chest that pushed her toward a decision she had never been designed to make. "You evacuate the civilians," she said. "I will delay the search teams." Torres laughed bitterly. "You're one person. They have 50 soldiers and air support. I am not a person," Zarathis said. "I am a weapon, and I choose how to be used." She walked past them toward the door. Jake caught her arm. "Wait, you'll die." "Perhaps. But the children in your medical bay will live. The doctors who care for flowers will live. The old men who grow food for strangers will live." She looked into his eyes. "Emma cannot be saved, but others like her can be." Jake's grip tightened on her arm. "There has to be another way." "There is," Zarathis said. "You could leave me here. Let the Catherians find me. I would tell them you died in the crash. The search would end, and you would go back to killing humans. She considered this. A week ago, that option would have been acceptable. Return to the fleet. Continue the war. Follow her programming. Now the thought made her feel sick. No, she said. I do not think I could do that anymore. The sound of explosions echoed through the cave system. The Cytherian search teams had reached the outer tunnels. Everyone move, Torres shouted. Medical personnel to evacuation point 2. Security teams to defensive positions. Chaos filled the corridors as people ran in all directions. Dr. Chen grabbed medical supplies. Jake helped wounded patients get to stretchers. Children cried as adults carried them toward hidden exits. Zarathus watched them go, then turned toward the sound of fighting. Her body began to change as she walked, but not in the way she expected. Usually, when she prepared for combat, her skin hardened into armor. Her limbs became weapons. Her mind focused on killing efficiently. This time was different. Her skin became more flexible, better at absorbing impacts. Her arms grew wider, capable of sheltering others behind them. Her back strengthened to carry heavy loads. She was not becoming a weapon. She was becoming a shield. The first Cytherian soldiers appeared at the end of the corridor. They wore black armor and carried energy rifles. When they saw her, they stopped in surprise. Princess Zarathus, their leader, called out, "You are alive. Return to the fleet immediately." "No," she said. The soldiers looked confused. This was not in their programming either. "You will obey," the leader said. "You were created to serve the Empire." "I was created to choose," Zarathus replied. "And I choose them." She pointed behind her where Jake was helping the last group of children reach safety. The Cytherian soldiers raised their weapons. Zarathus did not attack them. Instead, she spread her arms wide and became a living wall between the soldiers and the humans they were trying to protect. The energy beams struck her modified skin and scattered harmlessly. The soldiers fired again and again, but she absorbed every shot. Behind her, she could hear Jake's voice guiding people to safety. "Emma would have liked these flowers," he was saying to calm a frightened child. "She always said the yellow ones looked like tiny suns." Zarathus smiled as the energy beams washed over her. For the first time in her existence, she was doing exactly what she had been made to do. She was protecting the things that mattered. The battle became a running fight through the underground tunnels. Zarathus moved with the human survivors, her body forming a protective barrier between them and the Cytherian soldiers. Every time the enemy fired, she absorbed the energy. Every time they tried to advance, she blocked their path. But there were more soldiers coming. She could hear them in the side passages, trying to surround the evacuation group. Her enhanced hearing picked up radio chatter. Reinforcements were on the way. How much further to the ships? She called to Jake. 2 kilometers, he replied, carrying a wounded child on his back. But we have to cross open ground. They'll have air support waiting. Dr. Chen ran beside them, helping an elderly patient stay on his feet. There's another way, she said. Through the old mining shafts. It's longer but more cover. Do it, Zarathus said. They changed direction, following narrow tunnels that had been carved decades ago. The space was tight and dark, but it hid them from the worst of the Cytherian assault. As they moved, Zarathus discovered new abilities. When people stumbled, she could steady them with just a touch. When children cried, she could project a calming presence that soothed their fears. When the wounded needed help, her hands could ease their pain. Her body was adapting again, but not for war. It was adapting for protection, for healing, for giving others the strength to keep going. This is impossible, she whispered to herself. I was not designed for this, Jake heard her. Maybe you're designing yourself now. They reached the end of the mining tunnels as the sun was setting outside. Through a crack in the rocks, they could see the evacuation ships waiting in a valley half a kilometer away. But between them and safety lay open ground covered by Cytherian aircraft. They're jamming our communications, Lieutenant Torres reported. The ships don't know we're here. I can signal them, Dr. Chen said. But I'll have to get closer. Someone needs to create a distraction. Before anyone could volunteer, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed from the tunnel behind them. The Cytherian ground troops had found their trail. They're coming, Jake said. We're trapped. Zarathus looked at the group of humans around her. Wounded soldiers and frightened children, doctors and teachers and farmers. People who grew flowers for no reason except that flowers were beautiful. People who told stories to make others smile. People who sacrificed themselves to save strangers. People. Worth saving. Take the children and run for the ships, she told. Jake, I will hold them here. You can't fight all of them alone. I am not going to fight them. Zarathis smiled. I am going to talk to them. She turned toward the tunnel entrance as the first Catherian soldiers appeared. These were not the search teams from before. These were elite combat troops in full battle armor. Behind them came Princess Zarathis's own command unit, soldiers who had been created in the same labs designed with the same purpose. Stand down, their leader ordered. You will return to the fleet for recalibration. I do not need recalibration, Zarathis replied. I need you to listen. She closed her eyes and reached out with abilities she did not know she possessed. Her bioengineered nervous system had been designed to interface with Catherian military networks. Usually this was used to send tactical data and command orders. This time she sent something else. She sent the memory of Jake's voice talking about his daughter. The image of white flowers that looked like fallen stars. The feeling of protecting others instead of destroying them. The warm sensation in her chest when she chose to care about things that might be sad. The soldiers stopped advancing. Confusion appeared on their faces as foreign concepts flooded their minds. What is this? One of them whispered. It is what humans call love, Zarathis said. The transmission spread through the local command network, then beyond. To the ships in orbit, to the fleet preparing to bombard civilian targets, to Emperor Vextar himself, sitting on the bridge of the Stellar Dominion. Across space, Catherian soldiers began to hesitate. They thought about the humans they were about to kill. They wondered if those humans had children who drew pictures of flowers. They asked themselves if there might be another way. But the network connection worked both ways. As Zarathis spread empathy through the Catherian fleet, she felt their confusion and pain flooding back into her. The mental strain was enormous. Blood began to flow from her nose and ears. Princess, Jake shouted. You're killing yourself! She felt her body beginning to shut down, but she also felt something else. Thousands of Catherian minds beginning to change. To question. To doubt the righteousness of their war. That was when the sniper's beam struck Jake in the chest. He fell beside her, his breathing shallow and rapid. A Catherian marksman on a ridge above had taken the shot, trying to break her concentration. Jake! Dr. Chen ran toward them, but more soldiers blocked her path. Zarathis knelt beside Jake, her hands instinctively moving to heal his wounds. But the damage was too severe. Even her enhanced abilities could not save him. I'm sorry, he whispered. I wanted to see you succeed. You have, she said. Look. Around them, the Catherian soldiers were lowering their weapons. Some were removing their helmets, staring at the human civilians with new understanding. Others were speaking into their communicators, asking for new orders that made sense in this changed world. Jake smiled weakly and reached into his pocket. He pulled out Emma's drawing, a crude picture of yellow flowers drawn in crayon by a child who would never grow up. Water the flowers, he whispered. Don't let them be sad. Then he was gone. Zarathis held the drawing in her hands and felt something break open inside her chest. All the love and pain and hope that humans carried every day flooded through her at once, she screamed, and the sound carried across every Catherian communication channel in the fleet. It was not a sound of rage or defeat. It was the sound of a heart learning to care about others more than itself. In orbit, the weapons officer aboard the Stellar Dominion found himself unable to fire on the refugee camps below. The soldiers preparing to land found themselves unwilling to attack hospitals and schools. Across the entire fleet, Catherians began to ask a question they had never been designed to ask. What if we are wrong? Emperor Vextar tried to override the network, to reassert control over his forces. But the change had spread too far. Too many minds had been touched by the possibility of peace. Recall all forces, he finally ordered, his voice heavy with defeat. The invasion is suspended. 6 months later, Zarathis stood in a garden that grew on the border between human and Catherian space. It was much larger than the one in the underground cave, with flowers from dozens of worlds growing under a shared sun. Children played among the plants, some human, some Catherian, some from other species that had been caught in the war. They laughed together as they chased butterflies and collected interesting rocks. Dr. Chen worked nearby, teaching a group of Catherian medical students how to care for patients with empathy as well as skill. Lieutenant Torres, who had survived the evacuation, shared tactical lessons with former enemies who were learning to protect instead of conquer. But Zarathus's favorite part of the garden was a small section near the center, where white flowers grew in perfect rows. A sign beside them read, "Emma's Garden, for those who believe flowers can feel sad." She knelt beside the flowers every morning, just as Jake had taught her. She watered them carefully and spoke to them softly, telling them about the children playing nearby and the peace that was slowly growing between worlds. Sometimes, when the wind blew just right, she could almost hear Jake's voice carried on the breeze, and Emma's laughter, and the whispered thanks of 3 million civilians who had lived because someone chose to care about flowers that might be sad. The war was over. The galaxy was learning a new way to exist, and Princess Zarathus, who had been designed for destruction, had become something her creators never imagined possible. She had become hope.